Hi, I'm now going to show you the pivot function. This function is very useful when you try to deal with a dataset that comes with many years, like the one that we have in front of us, which is the World Governance Indicators from the World Bank. Every statistic program usually wants years to be displayed in a separate variable. Right now, when we go to Tableau Prep and we click on our Excel sheet of control of corruption, we can see that this is not the case. It actually expresses the variables with a year and a name, but both in one variable. What we actually would want is another variable that says year, just like it says code here, to work with. To do this, you click the plus and you add a pivot. The pivot function, first of all, on the left-hand side, asks you what you want to pivot. And in this case, we want to pivot all of the variables that we have. And you will see in a second what that does. So I'm just holding down Shift and selecting all the variables and I'm pulling them over. And you see up here, it transforms columns to rows. And in this case, this is exactly what we want. We want these to extend downwards somewhat. And down here, you get a preview. And here you have now the pivot names, which were the variable names before, and they are now not extended to the right. So in a wide format, but in a long format downwards. And this is precisely what we want. So we stick with this. All we're doing is we're adding another step, as we're always doing, to look at the data. One problem here is that we still have the years sticking to our variable name. There are some very powerful functions in Tableau Prep when you click the three buttons right beside the variable names. The function we are going to use is the split value function. And it's fine here to use the automatic split. What this will do, it will try to figure out if there is some delimiter in your variable name, which could be used to split this variable name into two. And in this case, or this observation name, and in this case, we have a space between the year and the name. So we hit automatic split and just try it. And as we see, now we have a dedicated year variable, which is on the left, and we should quickly rename this as year. We now have another variable that expresses the actual values, or the type of the variable rather. And here we have the actual values that correspond to this variable. This field right here is now redundant. It is the pivot names. We don't need this anymore. I'm just going to right-click remove. And with this, we're going into the next step, because what we want now is that the variables are actually extending in the wide format while the year is still extending in the long format. Just adding another pivot. We're now kind of doing the reverse. So up here where we set columns to rows, we now say rows to columns. And we drag the variable in the upper field, which is what we want to extend wide. And we take the values down here, which we want to continue to extend to the bottom, to the float, so in the long format, as we call it. And as you see, that could be it. That already looks good. Let's just add a step to see. And we now have a year variable, a country code, which is still attached. So we now have data for, let's say, Croatia in 2007. You will also find data for Croatia in another year. We can, for example, here click on Afghanistan and filter for it. And now we see that we have Afghanistan in here in our data set, and we have all of the different years associated with different values. Now let me show you one more trick, but because let's say you also want this for rule of law. What you can do is, of course, you drag rule of law into this. And now comes kind of the magic of Tableau. You can copy steps. So I copy these steps, I paste the steps. I just take this and say add it to it. And now it's doing exactly the same as for control of corruption. As long as your two datasets are very similar and use the same kind of words and codes, this should work. Of course, you have to be careful. You have to double check it. But in this case, as you can see, everything worked. And we now have a dataset which is exactly like the one above, right? Now, what we would do in order to combine the two, you already know. We can join them. Before that, we would normally rename all of these variables, but I'm lazy right now, so I'm not going to do it. But you would want to rename them to clearly see from where they are coming when you're joining. But let's just join the two. Because there's one special thing now. We have to join with two clauses. We now have a dataset that is expressed in years and countries, which means it is a panel dataset. In a panel dataset, you always have two identifiers, an entity and a time. So it's not enough to simply say match the year, right? We have to click this little plus sign up here and say also match the code, please. Now it shows you this, and this looks very good already. And if we look at the summary of join results, we see everything is in here. Everything is joined up.